So now I want to dive into talk to us about kinesiology, applied kinesiology, and why that works and what that is and how that helps you with the way that you practice.
Yeah, so I guess applied kinesiology, another word for it is muscle testing. I don't like to use that word as much because I think there's a negative connotation. Um, but anyway, it's a form of biofeedback, basically, is the way that I see it. And so we can kind of open up a dialogue with the body and ask it. I guess with the nervous system specifically is how we're using it. But we're opening up a dialogue with the body to kind of to ask it what its priorities are, with like which organ systems are under the most stress. We can use muscle testing to basically ask questions about any therapy that we might apply to the patient. So like you said, we do have a lot of tools in as human beings and physical bodies, and with technology, we have a lot of different options to treat things. So sometimes it is the best for somebody to take a pharmaceutical medication because it's so concentrated and it's such a strong piece of input to the body, and it kind of like it can force the body to work a certain way in that time. Anyway, but sometimes it's something more gentle like castor oil or like some kind of nutrition is more appropriate. But the cool thing about muscle testing is that we can also ask the body if the emotions are what's affecting that organ system and putting it under stress. So, for example, like since we're talking about um, the liver in Chinese medicine is basically it's an organ that can be stressed out by feelings like anger, resentment, irrationality, aggression, frustration. So the liver gallbladder, the wood element, is sensitive to those kind of emotional states. And so if there's an event that triggered those type of emotions that are being triggered on a regular basis, then that can wear down the liver's ability to do what it does. And so it's not to say that if you are angry or resentful, or if you're sensitive to those emotions from other people, that it can work that way too if you're empathetic. And so it doesn't mean to say that if you're feeling those things, your liver is going to be damaged. But what it does mean is that your liver is going to have, like, it's kind of like drains your liver battery, your liver's energy, because you're trying to uh, yeah, your body's trying to reconcile those emotions. And yeah, so that's kind of the link between Chinese medicine and what we do. And we use muscle testing to figure out which organ systems are under stress, and if it is indeed if there is an emotional stressor that
Yeah, I have a little story to talk about the liver. So when I lived in Texas and was living downwind from a hazardous plant waste, well, it was a cement plant that burned hazardous waste from the United States. And so my liver was being very much taxed. And I had so much suppressed anger. I was angry all the time. I could handle it until I exploded. And anyway, that was what it was. But as I healed my liver, I just stopped being angry. I wasn't having to repress the anger. It was just gone. And it was just so fascinating to see that within myself. And yeah, so that's a little story that I have. I thought of,
so I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's really fascinating. Now, with the applied kinesiology, why does that work? And I have in my mind two ways of why it works, but I'd love to hear your why does this even work, that a muscle would get weak or whatever when you're asking your body questions?
Yeah, so I guess if we take it back to the bandwidth example, if we apply a stress to the body or we ask the body to do something and it can't handle that, or if there's enough interference or enough stress created in the nervous system by us applying, or sorry, through us applying that stimulus, then it can blow out the nervous system and change the strength of a muscle. So we're not necessarily talking about like a muscle totally turning off when we're talking about muscle testing. We're talking about like a 4 out of 5 in strength versus, and that muscle being off or weak, quote unquote weak, versus like a 5 out of 5. So it's just that it doesn't lock. So for example, if somebody thinks about something that's significantly stressful, that pulls resources because I guess energy goes where attention flows. Energy flows where attention goes. Anyway, so if somebody thinks about something stressful, their body's resources are mobilized towards dealing with that. And then you just have less bandwidth in that moment to deal with everything else that's going on. We can also apply this to adjusting bones too. I mean, if we push on a bone or touch a bone, we're bringing the body's attention to that area. And if there's enough issue there, then it can blow out the nervous system basically temporarily. And then a muscle that we're using as an indicator for the nervous system's ability to handle that stress will turn off or go weak, I guess is another word for it. And maybe some of you have seen that before, where somebody's testing a muscle, just like a straight arm pull down test, and somebody's asked to think about something, or they touch a certain point on the body, and that arm, the strength in the muscle changes. It's kind of, we're just bringing the body's attention to different things in different areas. And if those are significantly under stress, then it's going to cause a change in the muscle. So it's basically a form of biofeedback. It's kind of like a stethoscope or an X-ray machine or a lab test, and then it's a tool to gain information. So it's not the only way we can get information about the body, but it's one way that we can. This form of biofeedback is one way we can ask or figure out what's going on with people.
Yeah, no, I I look at it as we are electrical beings, and this is like a short in the electrical system when.
Short, exactly, yeah. That's perfect, yeah.
Yeah, and then I look at it another way as well, that our spirit inside of us is strengthened by truth, because you can do this with just your name and feel what your muscle is strong to just what your name is, and then you make up a name and then your muscle will go weak. And it will show how when you are in truth, you will physically be more strong.
I like that. Beautiful, yeah.
Kind of interesting that way. But you can totally muscle through, also. It's like, you're not going to push my arm down. I mean, yeah.
There is that for sure. As I do this more and more, there aren't very many people that I can't test, because it can be more subtle when people have a lot of, when they're really well-trained athletes and they're able to respond to more subtle types of stress.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a difference in the strength for sure. Like they'll lock solid on, my name is John, and then they'll say my name is Sarah, and then it's not like it's going to totally give out, but there's going to be a twitch or something that'll let you know that.
Yeah.
So it depends on how people's physiology works, but most people are pretty easy to test that way. And I think you can even test yourself, like you were saying.
Yeah, no, there's been times that I have held food and it'll literally, I'll just stand with soft knees, and for me, it'll push me backwards. I have figured out what a yes for me looks like and what a no looks like. So like if I sit and hold sugar, I will go backwards. And, but like if I have brown rice, I will either stand strong or maybe even pull forward if my body really wants me to have brown rice right now. So it's just, there's many ways to get information in that and learn what to do it for yourself. So it's fun to put it in like a paper bag so you can't see what you're testing, so your mind doesn't know, but then your body just does it.
Right, exactly.
But having a clear mind while having a clear statement. This is 100% healthy for me right now, and so.
Yeah, it's interesting. The body doesn't tend to lie, but if you don't ask the right question and you interpret the answer in a way that it can be tricky, it can fool you. So I think you're right. When it comes to intention and not being attached to the outcome, I think is a big deal when you're doing muscle testing, because I think like our minds do change the physical environment around us. So
having a clear mind and a clear question or statement is important. Yeah. So tell me how you use this with taking care of emotions for your patients.
Yeah, so so we can use muscle testing. Basically, we'll just test an indicator muscle. So for example, with the liver, we found that it's correlated with the pec major sternal, like one of the chest muscles. Mm-hmm. So say the liver comes up as being under stress, we find that pec major sternal is turned off. It's weak, so to speak. We can ask the body if it's an emotional stress, or if there's an emotional stress contributing to that liver stress, by asking people to touch their forehead These are, I guess this is something people intuitively do when they're under stress. They'll like hold their head in their hands. And it's because these points are significant in processing emotional stress. So it's interesting how we do this, and we have these kind of sayings in our culture that have truth to them. But anyway, so we ask the body basically, if this turns on that pec major sternal, that liver muscle, then we know that there is an emotional component to that liver stress. So that's kind of like our body entry way of figuring out that there's an emotional stress. Also, if we can just ask somebody to think about something that's stressful to them and test any muscle, and it'll go weak if it's a significant enough stressor. So there's two ways we can figure out what the emotional stressor is. And then once we figure out what that emotional stressor is, via muscle testing, we figure out which meridian it's related to if we didn't use the body entry type thing. And then so liver will say, say it's frustration. Then we know which point we need to use to clear it. And then the other cool thing that we can do is we can ask if there was an original event that kind of set people up for the situation they're in currently. So, I mean, a lot of things happen to us when we were younger or in earlier stages of development, or we just didn't know then what we know now, kind of situations where we can't handle that stress. And something like, I don't know, if somebody kicks over your block castle when you're 2 and you spent like 30 minutes building it or whatever, it might be really traumatic, as opposed to like now, like you'd probably respond to that differently as an adult. But that emotion can still be in the background waiting to be triggered. Like you worked hard on something and then somebody doesn't appreciate it, or they, even worse, they destroy it or whatever it is. That's still going to bring up that same emotion that was created. I mean, we don't necessarily have to respond in emotional ways to things. But these complexes, these emotional states, it's like somebody does that, they destroy what you built, and then it brings you back to that 2-year-old state of development. So you have those tools to deal with it because that was what you physiologically had available. And so this is problematic because you can't necessarily respond to that person in a healthy or collaborative or even defensive way. You might just totally short circuit because you're back to being that 2-year-old. When somebody kicked over your castle. So anyway, so sometimes it's useful to find that original event where people like went through that feeling and they just didn't have what they needed to process it. They didn't have there was too much emotion, there was too much stress. So we can go back to those times, and then we can use the acupuncture meridians to allow the body to process that event energetically, so that it doesn't have to trigger that same emotional response or pull people back to that earlier developmental stage when they're triggered by that situation.
What are the topics that you ask about? Like, I've heard you do this with me all the times, but do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, I guess generally there are 3 things that stress people out in life. This is from NET, I guess, emotional technique. But generally, I think they're good enough categories. Like there's all the material things in life: money, job, career, finance. There's love, so everyone that's ever loved you, everyone you've ever loved. And then there's all the different roles that you play in your life. So you the mom, you the daughter, you the member of society, you the woman, you the physical being, you the emotional being, spiritual being. So we can figure out which category that emotion is related to.
Now you always have to add an extra one for me though. Taking on other people's stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then once we find the emotion, I think we sometimes do need to go deeper. Like, is there a contract that this person has set up, or is there an ancestral piece, or, I mean, heaven forbid, there's an entity attachment. These things are common enough that I think they're worth looking into. So that's usually, we do usually have to go deeper for you for whatever reason. I think empathetic people, like some people are here to kind of reconcile some of their family or their bloodlines past issues. And I don't know why that is exactly, or why we would have to do that here, but it comes up. So, and it helps people to be able to work through that stuff. So does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that gives people categories to hear. And if you know how to muscle test, you can muscle test those categories and figure out which one it is, and then do a process to release it, whether that process is prayer or writing or doing some sort of other thing that you say, when I choose to do this, I will release that. And that action and agency makes a difference with the release.
It does, yeah. And sometimes people don't realize they're even reacting to things. And so I think
Yeah.
the value in asking these questions is being able to pinpoint it. And then, yeah, so say, if every time, yeah, say you're feeling more frustrated than you want to be for whatever reason, or you feel like you're more like scared or whatever it is. If that's like a common theme, but you don't know exactly what the trigger is, sometimes asking these questions can get to the root of it. And then, like you said, if you know what the trigger is, then you can consciously be aware of that emotional response you're having. There's power in that, because you can change it, as long as you can recognize it, not just let it take you. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, learning to recognize, for sure. Yeah, no, I know that our physical bodies need specific things. And you do have given me lots of nutrition before, and we've done a little bit of pharmaceutical things, but I love how you do, the biochemically and the structurally and the mental and emotional, and it's just a nice package from a medical doctor. I appreciate the service that you give to your patients. So I can't believe our time is up. I would like you to talk about what you have for your free gift. I looked at it and I think it's a very nice, beautiful summary of many things that could be done to help people.
I wrote this a little while ago, so I don't know exactly what's in it, but I know we talk a little bit about things that you like. I know we talk about interference and a little people.
Mm-hmm. The interference field is in there, and the chemical criminals are in there, and you list those out, and how to you said it nourishment, but there's how to nourish your body in very simple, economical ways, and why those ways work. I loved how you explained it. And then calibrating for healing.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I guess stuff isn't all that fancy, but like you said, like hydration is a big deal. I mean, if our bodies are dehydrated, then the chemical processes that happen in our cells, they're just not as snappy. They're not as it just doesn't, like, things don't get cleared as the waste doesn't get cleared out as easily. So like hydration is, nothing else works as well without hydration. Breath is the same way. Actually, breath's more important. I mean, try holding your breath for 44 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Like, that gets really hard. I mean, you can go 10 minutes without water or food easily, more like 30 to 45 days without food. So I think working on these basic things like hydration, breath, and I can't sleep is really important too, because it seems like people do better when they do sleep, and like a lot of suffering is caused by not enough sleep or lack of sleep, that I think it's significant enough. So basically, I wrote that book to kind of cover some of the bases, like some of those basic bases, that if people have these things in place, like sometimes their issues go away. I mean, I had one patient come in, they came in for a free consult, and I said, you got to switch your water, drink enough water. And then, yeah, he came back for his initial exam, and most of his problems were like 90% better.
It's amazing. Well, and I don't mean to interject so much, but for me, with you teaching me how important the water intake is, I know I need to have at least 2 liters a day, and then a liter of electrolytes on top of that, for my body to handle what I need. And I'm not that big of a lady, and I know that, so that might be more anyway, but than most people get. But when I've been doing this summit, the amount of stress that I'm under, what I do is I have my water bottle, it's always by me, and I take a drink, and so I feel the stress, I'm like, drink water. And so stress, drink water, and I see the stress filtering out of my body. As I feel that water go down my throat, I imagine stress is releasing away. And like with sleep, the times that I haven't been able to stop my mind because I'm thinking, I'll be like, okay, well, my mind's thinking about the summit. I'm going to sit and think about gratitude, and that I'm thankful that God is supporting me, and that I'm choosing to be brave to serve. And so I just make that into a mantra, and think about that while I'm relaxing my body. And I may not go to sleep, but I am awakening refreshed because I'm in gratitude and at least relaxing my body. And sometime during that, I do fall asleep. But it's really interesting how we can control our minds and have it be, it can make a change for us so that we can get the sleep, so we can get the water, so we can have our bodies function better.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, I think all, like I said, all this stuff adds up. And so if you do these little small, I mean, yeah, it seems like it's not a very big deal, but like all these little things add up, and then your body works more the way it was designed to if you reduce those.
mhm. Yeah, and what I think what we found with me is I was trying to self-punish myself by not drinking water. It's like I knew I should drink water, but I could not get myself to drink water. And it's because there was something I felt like I needed to be punished about. And by clearing that out, now I can easily, now it doesn't drive me crazy if, oh, I got to drink more water. Just like, oh, drink water. That might sound really strange, but it's just like, I had this program that I needed to be punished for whatever reason, you know?
So all those things can change. Yeah, the way that you currently think doesn't necessarily have to be the way that you think. And I mean, sometimes these things are good. Sometimes they're letting us know that there are deeper things we need to address. But sometimes they're just weird programs that we get that we don't necessarily want or need or consciously, because we're not consciously aware of them. We don't necessarily think we can change them, but people are a lot stronger and more adaptable than they think. So yeah, so that's why I wrote that book. There's some basic stuff in there to help people to get started on feeling better.
Yes, well, thank you so much. I hope people choose to opt into that and give their email so that they can receive that from you. Well, we will end. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we end?
No, I think I appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, thanks again for putting this together.
Oh, thank you, thank you. And I want to thank everyone for being with us today, and hope you have the most lovely day. Make it be filled with peace and maybe even a little bit of laughter.